I stare at the pink slip in my hands, the words, "Termination effective immediately," swimming before my eyes like cruel little fish. 10 years of dedication to the Riverside Public Library, reduced to a single sheet of paper and a box of personal belongings. "I'm sorry, Sarah," Director Thompson says, not meeting my eyes. His hands fidget with a gold pen, the same one I'd given him last Christmas. "It's out of my hands. The board's decision is final." The lie in his voice is as clear as the afternoon sun streaming through his office window. I've known this man for a decade, watched him stammer through budget meetings and celebration speeches. He's never been good at deception. "Who made the call?" I ask, my voice steadier than I expect. "Really made it?" He clicks the pen repeatedly, a nervous tick I've seen 1,000 times. "I can't discuss that. Legal reasons, you understand." I don't understand, not at all. But I gather what's left of my dignity and stand up, the chair scraping against the floor with a sound like fingernails on a chalkboard. "Of course, legal reasons." The words taste like vinegar on my tongue. My box sits on my desk, hastily packed by someone else's hands. My carefully curated reading recommendations for the children's section are already gone, replaced by generic bestseller lists. They didn't waste any time erasing me. Emily catches me at the front desk, her face flushed with anger. "This is bullshit, Sarah. Complete bullshit. They can't just..." "They can," I cut her off, shifting the box in my arms. "They did. But your programs, the literacy initiative, someone else will handle it." The words come out sharper than intended, making Emily flinch. "Sorry, I need to process this." The walk to my car feels like a walk of shame, even though I've done nothing wrong. My mind races through possible reasons. Budget cuts, personal vendetta, the recent divorce making me appear unstable. None of it makes sense. My phone buzzes as I reach the parking lot. Unknown number. "Hello? Miss Mitchell?" A man's voice, smooth as aged whiskey. "I couldn't help but notice your situation at the library. Perhaps we could discuss some opportunities over coffee?" I should hang up. Strange men calling at precisely the wrong moment screams, "Trap." But something in his voice holds me there, like a hook caught in tender flesh. Who is this? Ryan Harper. The name means nothing to me, but the confidence in his tone suggests it should. "I have a proposition that might interest you, given your current circumstances." "My current circumstances happened 10 minutes ago." He chuckles, the sound rich and warm. "News travels fast in certain circles. The daily grind, 30 minutes. I'll be the one with the Wall Street Journal and an espresso." I should say no. Should go home, curl up with a bottle of wine, and lick my wounds. But anger and curiosity make a dangerous cocktail. 45 minutes, I counter. I need to drop some things at home. "Perfect. And Miss Mitchell? I'm truly sorry about the library. It's not right what they did to you." The line goes dead before I can respond. I sit in my car, staring at the box of memories in my passenger seat, and feel something shift inside me. The familiar comfort of books and routine crumbles away, revealing something harder underneath, something that wants answers. My phone buzzes again. Emily, probably checking on me. I ignore it. Whatever game this Ryan Harper is playing, whatever circles he moves in that knew about my firing before it happened, I'm going to find out. Because one thing's become crystal clear. This wasn't a simple termination. This was a calculated move in someone else's game, and I'm tired of being a pawn. The daily grind hums with afternoon activity as I spot Ryan Harper exactly where he said he'd be. His tailored suit stands out among the casual crowd like a shark in a goldfish pond. He rises when I approach, and I notice his smile doesn't quite reach his eyes. "Miss Mitchell, thank you for coming." He gestures to the chair across from him. A steaming cup already waits for me. My usual order, somehow. "How did you know what I drink?" "Lucky guess." He slides the cup closer. "Most librarians I know prefer their coffee like their books, complex and thoughtfully prepared." I leave the cup untouched. "Most librarians you know? And how many would that be?" His laugh is practiced, precise. Point taken. I did my homework before reaching out. Your reputation at Riverside was impressive. The children's literacy program in particular caught my attention. You still haven't explained why I'm here. Direct. I like that. He leans forward, lowering his voice. What if I told you I could offer you something better than your position at the library? Something that would make today's unpleasantness seem like a blessing in disguise? My phone buzzes again, Emily's third attempt to reach me. I silence it without looking away from Ryan's face. I'd say that timing is everything, and yours is suspiciously perfect. Sometimes opportunity knocks at unexpected moments. He pulls out a business card, sliding it across the table. The paper feels expensive between my fingers. My family's foundation is launching a new educational initiative. We need someone with your expertise to oversee it. The Harper Foundation, I read aloud. The logo looks familiar. I've seen it on donor plaques around town. Why me? Because you understand the importance of stories, of shaping narratives. Something shifts in his expression, almost imperceptible. The position comes with significant resources at your disposal, complete creative control. And what's the catch? Dinner. He says it simply, like he's suggesting a handshake. With my parents this Saturday. They'll want to meet the person who'll be handling such a delicate project. My coffee sits untouched, growing cold. You orchestrated my firing, didn't you? Instead of denying it, he studies me with newfound interest. Would it matter if I did? The outcome remains the same. You need a job, and I'm offering you an opportunity that could change your life. That's not a no. No, it's not. He reaches across the table, his fingers brushing mine as he retrieves his business card. 7 o'clock Saturday. The address is on the back. Wear something elegant. My mother notices these things. I should walk away. Every instinct screams that I'm being manipulated, moved like a piece on a chessboard. But curiosity burns stronger than caution. Why go to all this trouble? You could have just approached me at the library. Some doors need to close before others can open. He stands, adjusting his cuffs with practiced precision. Besides, I find that people are most interesting when they're knocked off balance, shows their true character. As he turns to leave, I call after him. And what if I don't show up? He pauses, that same calculated smile playing at his lips. Then you'll never know why the board was so eager to let you go, will you? The cafe feels colder after he leaves. I finally take a sip of the coffee he ordered. Perfect temperature, exactly how I like it. My phone buzzes again, this time with a text from Emily. Where are you? We need to talk about what happened. I stare at the message, then at the business card still on the table. Ryan's words echo in my head. Some doors need to close before others can open. He's right about one thing. I want answers. But as I pick up the card and run my thumb across the embossed lettering, I can't shake the feeling that I'm about to walk through a door that won't easily close behind me. Saturday's dinner invitation sits like a weight in my pocket, a ticket to either salvation or damnation. Only one way to find out which. I text Emily back. Rain check. Something came up. Then I add the Harper Foundation's address to my calendar, already wondering what elegant means to people who can orchestrate someone's firing with a snap of their fingers. Game on, Ryan Harper. Game on. The Harper Mansion looms before me like something out of a Gothic novel, all sharp angles and dark windows. Victoria Harper's smile is equally sharp as she opens the door, her pearl necklace catching the evening light. Sarah, darling, right on time. Her perfume wraps around me like expensive chains. Ryan speaks so highly of you. The foyer could swallow my entire apartment. Family portraits line the walls, generations of Harpers staring down with identical calculated smiles. Ryan appears at my elbow, his hand settling at the small of my back. Mother, you're hovering. Nonsense. I'm being welcoming. Victoria's eyes flick over my dress, the most expensive thing I own, and clearly not expensive enough. Daniel's in the study. Why don't you show Sarah around while I check on dinner? Ryan guides me through rooms that feel more like museum exhibits than living spaces. In the study, Daniel Harper barely looks up from his laptop. Welcome to the family business, he says, as if my presence is already a foregone conclusion. The word family catches in my throat like a fishhook. During dinner, Victoria orchestrates the conversation like a conductor, each topic carefully selected. Ryan tells us you're quite the expert on community engagement, she says, cutting into her perfectly cooked salmon. Such a shame about the library. Politics can be so messy. Politics? I set down my fork. I was told it was a budget issue. Oh, everything's politics these days. Victoria waves her hand dismissively. The right word in the right ear, and suddenly budgets appear or disappear. Fascinating process, really. Ryan tenses beside me. I feel the trap closing, but can't see its shape yet. Speaking of processes, Daniel interjects. Have you considered our offer, Sarah, the foundation position? I'm still evaluating my options. Victoria's smile tightens. Options, dear, in this economy? Besides, we're offering you something quite special. The Foundation's new literacy initiative could use someone with your particular background. My background as a recently fired librarian? Your background as someone who understands loss, Victoria says softly, and the importance of securing one's future. The room suddenly feels airless. Ryan's hand finds mine under the table, but I can't tell if it's meant to comfort or restrain. Mother, Ryan starts, but Victoria cuts him off. I'm simply being honest, dear. Sarah's clearly intelligent. She must understand what we're offering. And what exactly is that, I ask, though I already know the answer won't be the truth. Security, influence, family. Victoria sets down her wine glass with precise movements. Things I imagine you've been missing since your divorce. Speaking of which, how is Thomas enjoying his new position at Sterling and Myers? The law firm partnership suits him, I hear. The pieces click into place with nauseating clarity. My ex-husband's sudden career jump, the library board's unexpected decision, the Harper Foundation's timely offer. You've been watching me, I say. Planning this. Planning implies calculation, Victoria corrects. We prefer to think of it as creating opportunities. For whom? For all of us. Daniel finally looks up from his plate. The Foundation needs fresh blood, new perspectives, and you need a safety net. What I need, I push back from the table, is air. Ryan follows me onto the terrace, closing the French doors behind us. Sarah, wait. It's not what you think. Really? Because I think your family orchestrated my firing, manipulated my ex-husband's career, and is now trying to buy me with some vague promise of security. They're trying to help. Help who, Ryan? Them? You? Because it sure as hell isn't me. He runs a hand through his hair, frustration breaking through his polished veneer. You don't understand how they operate. Everything's a transaction to them, even love. Is that what this is? Love? The question hangs between us like smoke. Inside, I can see Victoria watching through the window, her expression unreadable. Come back inside, Ryan pleads. Let me explain. But I'm already moving toward the driveway, my heels clicking against the stone path like tiny hammers nailing shut a coffin. Behind me, I hear Victoria's voice drift through the open window. Let her go, darling. She'll be back. They always come back when they run out of options. I pause at my car, looking back at the mansion. Ryan stands frozen on the terrace, caught between his mother's shadow and the fading light. For a moment, I almost pity him. Almost. The letter arrives on expensive cream paper, hand-delivered to my apartment. Inside, a single sheet contains life-changing news. My great-aunt Eleanor, whom I'd met exactly twice, has left me her entire estate. The inheritance that would solve all my problems. Except for one detail. Victoria Harper is the executor. I'm still staring at the letter when Emily bursts through my door. You need to see this. She thrusts her tablet at me, displaying a news article about the Harper Foundation's latest acquisition, the Riverside Public Library building. They're converting it into a private research facility, Emily says, watching my face. Guess who's leading the project? Thomas. My ex-husband's name tastes like copper in my mouth. They're all connected, aren't they? There's more. Emily swipes to another article. Ryan's been appointed to the city council. The vote was unanimous. A knock at the door makes us both jump. Ryan stands there looking less polished than usual. We need to talk. Emily moves between us. She's not interested. It's about Eleanor Mitchell's estate. His eyes meet mine. Mother's making her move tomorrow. I let him in, despite Emily's warning glare. He paces my small living room like a caged animal. The foundation position, the library, Thomas. It was all groundwork, he says. They needed control of your assets before... He stops abruptly. Before what? Before the merger. He runs a hand through his disheveled hair. Harper Industries is bleeding money. They need Eleanor's estate to shore up the losses. Mother's planning to declare you mentally unfit to manage the inheritance. Emily curses under her breath. I feel oddly calm, like I'm watching this happen to someone else. She can't do that, Emily protests. Sarah's perfectly competent. She has Thomas's testimony about Sarah's emotional instability during the divorce. The library board's statement about her erratic behavior. It's all fabricated, but it's enough, I finish. That's why she wanted me at the foundation, to document my decisions, build a case. Ryan nods, not meeting my eyes. I tried to stop it, but you're a coward. The words come out flat, factual. Sarah, why tell me now? He finally looks at me. Because I found out what happened to Eleanor Mitchell. She didn't die of natural causes. The room goes silent. Emily's hand finds mine, squeezing hard. Mother arranged for her medication to be adjusted. She'd been planning this for months, waiting for the right moment. When you lost your job, became vulnerable. He trails off. Get out. My voice doesn't shake. Neither do my hands. Sarah, please, I'm trying to help. Like you helped Eleanor? The calm starts cracking. Get out. He leaves a file on my coffee table before going. Everything you need to know is in here. But be careful. Mother's having you watched. After he's gone, Emily starts making calls to lawyer friends. I open the file with trembling fingers. Inside, I find documentation of Victoria's schemes, emails, financial records, medical reports, a paper trail of destruction. My phone buzzes with a text from Victoria. Dinner tomorrow? We should discuss Eleanor's estate. Your future depends on it. Emily looks up from her phone. Marcus Flynn called back. He's willing to meet tonight. Who's Marcus Flynn? Former Harper Industries executive, left under mysterious circumstances last year, says he has information we need. I stare at Victoria's text, thinking about Eleanor, about the library, about all the lives the Harpers have casually destroyed. Tell him I'll be there. Sarah, Emily hesitates. Are you sure about this? These people are dangerous. I pick up Eleanor's letter, running my fingers over the expensive paper. They think I'm just another pawn, someone to manipulate and discard. I meet Emily's worried gaze. But they forgot something important. What's that? In chess, a pawn that reaches the other side of the board becomes a queen. I type a response to Victoria. Looking forward to it. The pieces are set. Tomorrow, Victoria expects to meet a broken woman ready to surrender her inheritance. Instead, she'll meet someone else entirely, someone who knows how to play the game. Marcus Flynn's office sits above a closed pawn shop, the kind of place the Harpers wouldn't deign to notice. Perfect for plotting their downfall. Victoria's pattern is consistent, Marcus says, spreading photographs across his desk. She finds vulnerable people with valuable assets, integrates them into the family's orbit, then destroys them systematically. The photos show familiar faces, all people who'd crossed paths with the Harpers, all broken in different ways. My phone buzzes with a text from Lily. Why is Victoria Harper asking me about your mental health? My hands clench. They're targeting my sister. Of course they are. Marcus's voice carries the weight of experience. Victoria likes to create pressure points. Your sister, your job, your reputation. She'll use everything. You sound like you know her well. His smile doesn't reach his eyes. I was chief financial officer at Harper Industries for 15 years, until I discovered irregularities in their charitable foundation's accounts. Next thing I knew, my wife was leaving me over fabricated evidence of an affair, and my teenage daughter wouldn't speak to me. Emily shifts in her chair. Why help Sarah? Why now? Because Victoria made a mistake with Eleanor Mitchell's estate. She got sloppy, left traces. He pulls out another file, including this. The document shows a series of transfers from Harper Industries to offshore accounts, each coinciding with a death or disappearance. Eleanor's name is the last on the list. My phone buzzes again. Ryan. Mother's meeting with the probate judge tomorrow. Whatever you're planning, do it fast. They're moving faster than we thought, I say. Marcus nods. Victoria's desperate. Harper Industries is hemorrhaging money. Without Eleanor's estate, they'll lose everything, Emily finishes. Not just money. Marcus's expression darkens. Power. Control. Victoria's entire identity is built on being untouchable. Take that away. My phone rings. Lily again. This time I answer. Sarah? Her voice trembles. Victoria's here at my apartment. She says she's worried about you, that you're having some kind of breakdown. She brought papers for me to sign. Don't sign anything. My voice sounds strange in my ears. I'm coming over. There's someone else here too. Thomas? Your ex? They're saying... The line goes dead. Emily's already grabbing her keys, but Marcus stops us. Wait! This is exactly what Victoria wants. To force you into making a mistake. That's my sister. And if you rush in without a plan, you'll lose everything, including any chance of helping Lily. He's right, but every second feels like betrayal. I force myself to think like Victoria, calculate moves and counter moves. The probate hearing, I say slowly. What if we let Victoria win? Emily stares at me. Have you lost your mind? No. Marcus leans forward. She's thinking like a chess player. Sometimes you have to sacrifice a piece to win the game. My phone buzzes one final time. Victoria. Lovely chat with Lily. She's so concerned about you, dear. Shall we discuss terms? I show them the message. Victoria thinks she has all the pieces in place, so let's let her think she's won. While we set up the real endgame, Marcus agrees. But Sarah, you need to understand, once we start this, there's no going back. Victoria won't just try to destroy you. She'll annihilate everything you care about. I think about Eleanor, about Lily, about all the lives Victoria has casually ruined, about the look in Ryan's eyes when he finally chose to warn me. Too little, too late. Good, I say, and my voice sounds like someone else's, someone harder. Because I'm going to do the same to her. Emily touches my arm. Sarah, this isn't about revenge anymore. I pick up one of Marcus's photographs, a family much like mine, now broken beyond repair. This is about justice, about making sure Victoria Harper never hurts another family again. Marcus gathers the files with practiced efficiency. Then let's begin. But remember, from this moment on, trust no one. Not Ryan, not the police, not even me. Why not you? His smile turns bitter. Because everyone has something to lose, and Victoria's very good at finding out what that is. I send Victoria a response. Terms, tomorrow, 9 a.m. Then I turn off my phone and start learning how to destroy the woman who thought she could own me. Tomorrow, Victoria Harper will think she's won everything, and that's exactly when she'll start losing it all. The probate hearing feels like a carefully orchestrated play, with Victoria Harper as both director and star. She sits across from me in the judge's chambers, perfectly composed in Chanel, while I deliberately let my hands shake as I hold the papers. Miss Mitchell appears unable to manage her affairs, Victoria says softly, concern dripping from every syllable. The recent erratic behavior, the job loss, the emotional instability. My lawyer, carefully chosen by Marcus for this performance, makes a weak protest. Judge Harrison barely glances up from the documentation. And you're willing to assume responsibility for the estate's management, Mrs. Harper? It's the least we can do for poor Eleanor's niece. I sign the papers with trembling fingers, playing my part. Victoria's smile widens fractionally, a predator's satisfaction at a clean kill. But as we leave the chambers, Emily rushes in, her face ashen. Sarah, it's Lily. She's in the hospital. The performance drops away like shattered glass. What? Apparent overdose, Emily says, watching Victoria from the corner of her eye. They found prescription medications. Victoria touches my arm, her grip steel beneath silk. My dear, this only proves we made the right decision. You need to focus on your sister now, not worry about managing an estate. I pull away, already running. Behind me, I hear Victoria's measured steps following at a careful distance, close enough to show concern, far enough to deny involvement. At the hospital, Thomas stands outside Lily's room, looking uncomfortable in his expensive suit. My ex-husband, now Victoria's puppet, blocking my path. You can't go in, he says. They're reviewing her psychiatric hold. Psychiatric hold? Given her state when they found her and the notes. What notes? He pulls out his phone, shows me texts supposedly from Lily about my unstable behavior, my paranoid accusations against the Harpers, my declining mental state, all perfectly crafted to support Victoria's narrative. You helped them do this, I realize. To my sister. Sarah, you need help, we're all worried. Ryan appears from around the corner, his face tight. Father's calling an emergency board meeting. They're announcing the merger tomorrow. Merger? The pieces click together with sickening clarity. You're selling Harper Industries. Restructuring, Ryan corrects, not meeting my eyes. Once Mother has control of Eleanor's estate, the company's debt disappears, I finish. And Lily? Was putting my sister in the hospital part of the restructuring plan? Victoria appears behind me, her voice carrying just far enough for nearby nurses to hear. Dear, you're getting agitated again. Perhaps you should let the doctors examine you while you're here? I feel the trap closing. The concerned family members, the documented instability, the convenient timing. One wrong move and I'll join Lily under psychiatric observation. My phone buzzes. Marcus. Don't react. Everything's proceeding as planned. But the plan didn't account for Lily, for Victoria, crossing this line. Ryan touches my arm. Sarah, please, just let us help. I jerk away, my voice rising deliberately. Help? Like you helped Eleanor? Victoria's mask slips for just a moment. Fear flickers behind her eyes. Security, Thomas calls right on cue. We need assistance here. As security approaches, I let them see exactly what Victoria wants them to see. An unstable woman having a breakdown. I struggle just enough to seem erratic but not dangerous. Take care of my sister, I tell Emily as they lead me away. Don't let them near her. Victoria watches from the doorway, victory written in every line of her perfect posture. She thinks she's won everything, the estate, the company, my freedom, my sister. She doesn't see Marcus in the parking lot, recording everything. Doesn't notice Emily slipping a nurse a thumb drive. Doesn't realize that sometimes, to win the game, you have to sacrifice your queen. In the security office, waiting for the psychiatric evaluation that Victoria undoubtedly arranged, I close my eyes and think of Eleanor, of Lily, of all the pieces Victoria moved so carefully into place. My phone buzzes one last time. Marcus. Files delivered. Tomorrow's board meeting will be interesting. I delete the message just as the doctor arrives, his clipboard already full of Victoria's carefully crafted concerns. Time to play my final role, the pawn who didn't realize she was about to become a queen. Tomorrow, Victoria Harper will learn that the game isn't over until the last piece falls, and I intend to make sure that piece is her. The Harper Industries boardroom buzzes with tension as Victoria takes her place at the head of the table. I watch through the security feed from Marcus's laptop, surrounded by federal agents in an unmarked van outside. The merger documentation is complete, Victoria announces to the board. With the Mitchell estate securing our position, the boardroom door swings open. Ryan walks in, followed by Emily and a stone-faced woman in a federal jacket. Actually, Mother, Ryan says, his voice steady, we should discuss the irregularities in the foundation's accounts first. Victoria's smile doesn't waver. This isn't the time. It's exactly the time. I step into the room, making Victoria freeze mid-sentence. Before we discuss my aunt's estate, let's talk about how she died. Security! Daniel starts to rise, but the federal agent raises her badge. Nobody leaves this room. Victoria's composure cracks for just a moment. Sarah, dear, shouldn't you be at the hospital? With my sister? The one you poisoned with the same medication cocktail that killed Eleanor? I slide a USB drive across the polished table. Everything's here. The offshore accounts, the falsified medical records, the pattern of mysterious deaths following Harper Foundation interventions. Lies, Victoria hisses, from an unstable woman. From your own records, Marcus steps in, carrying a familiar leather briefcase. The ones you kept in your private safe, the one I installed when I was CFO. Victoria's eyes dart between faces, calculating odds, searching for allies. She finds none. Ryan, she tries, surely you don't believe. I found Eleanor's original medical records, Ryan cuts her off. The ones before you had them altered. I'm done protecting this family's secrets. Victoria laughs, the sound brittle as breaking glass. Protected? You've never protected anything, Ryan. You're weak, just like your father. I built this empire while he played golf and you chased pretty girls. I made us untouchable. You made us monsters, Ryan says quietly. Victoria stands, suddenly radiating fury. Everything I did for this family, for our legacy. You think you can destroy that with some paperwork? I own this town. One phone call. To whom? I ask. Judge Harrison? He's being questioned about Eleanor's probate hearing. Thomas? He's already cutting a deal to save himself. Your pet doctors? They're running scared. You stupid girl. Victoria's smile turns vicious. You think this is justice? Revenge? You're just like the others. Weak, sentimental, easily broken. I'll destroy you, just like I destroyed them. And when I'm done, no one will even remember your name. That's where you're wrong. I pull out my phone, press play. Victoria's own voice fills the room, confessing to Eleanor's murder in the hospital corridor. I don't care if people remember my name. I care that they'll never forget yours. The boardroom erupts into chaos. Federal agents pour in. Daniel crumples in his chair. Board members scramble to distance themselves. But Victoria stands perfectly still, staring at me with something like recognition. Well played, she says softly. I almost wish you were really my daughter-in-law. We could have been magnificent together. I prefer magnificent on my own. As they lead Victoria away, Ryan touches my arm. Sarah, Don't. I step back. You chose your side too late. What happens now? I look around the boardroom at the empire Victoria built through blood and manipulation. Now, I'm going to do what librarians do best, preserve history, make sure no one forgets what happened here. Marcus appears at my shoulder. The federal investigation will take months. They'll want your testimony. They'll have it after I check on my sister. I turn to leave, but Victoria's voice stops me at the door. You think this is over? That you've won? She laughs, the sound echoing off marble walls. Oh, my dear, you have no idea what you've started. I meet her eyes one last time. No, Victoria, this isn't about winning, it's about justice. The difference is what you never understood. The federal agents lead her away, but her laughter follows me down the corridor. I don't look back. I've seen enough of Victoria Harper's face to last a lifetime. Besides, I have a sister to visit, a foundation to rebuild, and a story to tell. And this time, I'll make sure it has the right ending. The old library building still smells like books, even as workers strip away the Harper Foundation logos. Lily sits beside me on the front steps, her recovery visible in the return of color to her cheeks. What will you call it? She asks, watching the new sign being installed. The Eleanor Mitchell Memorial Library and Community Center. I hand her the dedication speech. Want to read it at the opening? She squeezes my hand instead of answering. We both know what it means, her voice getting stronger, her story becoming part of the narrative. Emily appears with coffee and newspaper clippings. Victoria Harper's conviction made headlines, but the smaller stories matter more. The returned properties, the overturned contracts, the lives slowly being rebuilt from the wreckage of Harper Industries. Marcus called, Emily says, settling beside us. He's testifying in another case. Apparently, Victoria's web stretched further than we thought. And Ryan? Cooperating with the investigation. He's selling everything, using the money to set up victim restitution funds. The morning sun catches the library's windows, and for a moment I see Eleanor's reflection instead of mine. What would she think of all this? Of justice served through careful manipulation and calculated revenge? A familiar car pulls up. Thomas, my ex-husband, looking smaller somehow without Victoria's influence propping him up. Sarah, he approaches cautiously. I heard about the opening. I wanted to... He trails off, noticing Lily's sharp gaze. I'm sorry for everything. I know. And I do know, finally. We were all pieces on Victoria's board, moved by her invisible hands. The difference was in how we chose to break free. He leaves a check, his contribution to the restitution fund, and drives away. One more thread in the tapestry of aftermath. Marcus arrives as the workers finish the sign. Quite a legacy you're building. Speaking of legacies, I turn to face him. When were you going to tell me about your daughter? He stiffens slightly. What about her? That Victoria didn't just destroy your career, that your daughter's mysterious illness cleared up as soon as you agreed to leave Harper Industries. His silence speaks volumes. You could have told me. We were fighting the same battle. No, he says quietly. You were fighting for justice. I was fighting for revenge. There's a difference. Is there? He gestures at the library, at the people gathering for the soft opening. Look what you built from the ashes. Me? I'm still burning. Before I can respond, a commotion erupts at the entrance. Daniel Harper stands there, aged decades in mere months, clutching an old book. It was Eleanor's, he says, holding it out like a peace offering. Victoria kept it as insurance. I thought you should have it. Inside, Eleanor's careful handwriting fills the margins with notes about the Harper family, observations, suspicions, plans never enacted. She saw it all coming, but ran out of time to stop it. Thank you, I say, but Daniel's already walking away, another ghost of the empire Victoria built, and I helped destroy. Lily reads over my shoulder. She was trying to protect you, wasn't she? Eleanor. She was trying to protect everyone. I close the book gently. Come on, let's go inside. The library fills with light and voices, children exploring the new reading nook, adults browsing job resources, life flowing back into spaces Victoria tried to control. But as I walk through my rebuilt world, Victoria's last words echo in my mind. You have no idea what you've started. Maybe she was right. Maybe this isn't an ending at all. Emily touches my arm. You okay? Just thinking about stories, I say, watching Lily help a young girl find the perfect book. How they never really end the way you expect. And how's this one ending? I look around at my transformed kingdom, built not from fear and manipulation like Victoria's, but from the ashes of what she destroyed. The power to help or harm, to rebuild or destroy, now rests in my hands. It's not, I realize. It's just changing chapters. The library hums with possibility, with futures being rewritten page by page. Victoria thought power meant controlling the story. I know better now. True power is giving others the chance to write their own.
She doesn't understand the first thing about precision engineering. My father-in-law's voice carried through the partially open door of the executive boardroom. This is Montgomery Precision, not some arts and crafts project. I froze outside, the quarterly reports clutched to my chest, my knuckles white against the manila folder. I should have been used to William Montgomery's dismissals by now. After all, I'd endured 5 years of them since marrying his son David and joining the family business. My name is Olivia Reyes Montgomery, and at 34, I'd spent the last 5 years helping transform Montgomery Precision from a regional manufacturing company into one of the most innovative aerospace component suppliers in the industry. Not that William ever acknowledged my contributions. To him, I was the outsider who'd married his only son, the graphic designer who had no place in his world of machine tolerances and metal alloys. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The conversation in the room halted abruptly. William sat at the head of the conference table, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, his tailored suit a shield of authority. David sat beside him, glancing up with a mixture of guilt and discomfort in his eyes. The other board members, mostly William's golfing buddies, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "Olivia," William said, forcing a thin smile. "We're in the middle of a private discussion." "About me, it seems," I replied, keeping my voice steady as I approached the table. Since I'm the topic of conversation, I thought I might as well join in. William's jaw tightened. "This is a board matter. Your quarterly design report can wait." "My quarterly operations report," I corrected. "As Chief Operations Officer, I'm here to discuss our production efficiency improvements and the success of the new aerospace division, which has increased company revenue by 22% this quarter alone." I placed the folder on the table and met William's gaze directly. 5 years at Montgomery Precision had taught me that showing weakness around William Montgomery was like bleeding in shark-infested waters. "We'll review it later," William said dismissively. "The board is currently discussing leadership restructuring." "You mean my removal," I stated flatly. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. David cleared his throat but said nothing, his typical response whenever his father and I clashed. Always the peacekeeper, never the defender. William leaned forward, his patience visibly thinning. "Montgomery Precision has been a family business for 3 generations. The Montgomery name stands for excellence in engineering. Real engineering, not the cosmetic changes you've been implementing." "Cosmetic?" I couldn't help but laugh. "The integrated quality control system I developed has reduced defects by 63%. The workflow restructuring saved us nearly $2 million in the first year alone. And the aerospace division you opposed so strongly, it now accounts for almost a third of our total revenue." Numbers on paper, William waved his hand dismissively. "This company was built on relationships and reputation, not flashy presentations and risky ventures. The aerospace contract with Northstar wasn't risky. It was the opportunity we needed to move beyond regional manufacturing. The world is changing, William. Montgomery Precision needed to change with it." "That's enough." William's voice hardened. "This meeting is for board members only. As you're so fond of reminding us with your operations reports, you should be attending to the day-to-day running of the company, not interrupting board discussions." I glanced at David, waiting for him to speak up, to acknowledge that the leadership restructuring directly concerned his wife. But he just sat there, his eyes fixed on the table. "Fine," I said, gathering my reports. "When you're ready to discuss actual company performance rather than family politics, you know where to find me." As I walked out, I heard William continuing as if I'd never interrupted. "As I was saying, gentlemen, Montgomery Precision needs a return to traditional leadership." The door closed behind me, but his words had already planted a seed, one that had been germinating for months now. It was time to make a change. 3 hours later, I sat in my office, staring at the email I drafted to Alan Chen, CEO of Vertex Innovations, one of the most forward-thinking aerospace manufacturing firms in the country. We'd met at an industry conference 6 months ago, and he'd been consistently impressed with the innovations I'd implemented at Montgomery. So impressed, in fact, that he'd mentioned bringing me on as Vertex's new COO if I ever tired of family businesses. At the time, I laughed it off. Despite William's constant undermining, I believed in what I was building at Montgomery. I believed David would eventually step out of his father's shadow, and we would lead the company together into a new era. That belief had been growing increasingly fragile. I was still staring at the unsent email when David appeared in my doorway, his expression a familiar mix of apology and frustration. "Liv, about the meeting." "Dumped," I cut him off. "Just don't, David. We both know exactly what happened in there. What always happens." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Dad's from a different generation. He built this company with his hands. He just wants to protect its legacy by pushing out the only person who's actually growing it." I shook my head. "Your father isn't protecting anything. He's watching the industry evolve from the sidelines and refusing to join in. If Montgomery doesn't adapt, it dies. It's that simple." David ran a hand through his dark hair, a nervous habit he'd had since college when we'd first met. Back then, I found it endearing. Now it just reminded me of his inability to stand firm on anything. "He's talking about bringing in Richard as interim COO," he finally admitted. "Just temporarily, until things stabilize." Richard, William's nephew. The same Richard who had run his own father's manufacturing business into bankruptcy through sheer incompetence before William had rescued him with a meaningless VP title at Montgomery. I laughed, the sound hollow even to my own ears. Of course he is. And what did you say when your father suggested replacing your wife with his failure of a nephew? David's silence was answer enough. Right, I said quietly. You said nothing. What do you want me to do, Liv? He's my father. This is his company. It's our company, I countered. Yours and mine. We've poured everything into Montgomery for 5 years. I've worked 80-hour weeks to modernize production, secure the aerospace contracts, implement systems that will keep this company relevant for another generation. And your father wants to erase all of that because he can't stand that the ideas came from me. David sighed, dropping into the chair across from my desk. Give it some time. The quarterly numbers are strong. Even Dad can't argue with success. Once the North Star project is complete and we can show the full return on investment, he'll come around. I study my husband, truly seeing him for perhaps the first time in our marriage. David was brilliant in his own way, a gifted engineer with an eye for design that had revolutionized our product aesthetics. But he would never stand up to his father. Not for the company, and not for me. I can't do this anymore, I said finally. What do you mean? This, I gestured around us. Being constantly undermined, having my expertise questioned, walking on eggshells in a company where I'm one of the principal architects of its current success. I'm done, David. His face paled. You're not thinking of leaving Montgomery? I didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. You can't, he said, leaning forward. We're in the middle of the North Star expansion. The aerospace division is your baby. No one else understands it like you do. Apparently Richard will figure it out, I replied, my voice laced with bitterness. Liv, please. If you leave now, it will only prove Dad right. And there it was, the real concern. Not that Montgomery would suffer without me, but that William's low opinion of me would be validated. I think we're done here, I said, turning back to my computer. You should get back to the board meeting before your father sends a search party. After David left, I stared at the email to Alan Chen for another long moment before finally pressing send. Not a commitment, just an inquiry about the opportunity he mentioned. An escape hatch if I needed it. Little did I know how quickly I would. The next morning, I arrived at the office to find my security clearance revoked for the Aerospace Development Wing. When I called the security desk, they informed me that Mr. Montgomery has implemented new access protocols. No mention of which Mr. Montgomery, but I knew it wasn't David. By lunchtime, rumors were swirling that Richard would be taking over aerospace operations temporarily while I focused on core manufacturing processes. My assistant, Maya, delivered this news with wide eyes and barely concealed outrage. Everyone knows he doesn't know the first thing about aerospace, she fumed. The North Star team is already panicking. I maintained my composure, thanked her for the information, and closed my office door. Then I opened my laptop and responded to Alan Chen's enthusiastic reply to my email from the previous night. Let's meet, tomorrow if possible. By the end of the day, William had made it official. Richard would be overseeing the aerospace division effective immediately. I was being reassigned to oversee the traditional manufacturing operations, essentially a demotion disguised as a lateral move. David called from the airport, conveniently scheduled to visit a client site just as his father made this power play. It's just temporary, he insisted. Dad's just trying to show who's in charge. Once I'm back, we'll sort this out. There's nothing to sort out, I replied, my decision solidifying with every word. Your father has made his position clear, and so have you, by your absence. That's not fair, Liv. This client meeting has been planned for weeks. Life rarely arranges itself conveniently, David. Sometimes you have to choose what matters most. You matter most, he said, but the words rang hollow. We'll fix this when I get back, I promise. I didn't bother responding to the empty promise. We both knew he wouldn't stand up to William, not in any way that mattered. The next morning, I met Alan Chen for breakfast at a quiet restaurant 20 miles from Montgomery Precision. No need to fuel the rumor mill any further. I've been hoping you'd call, Alan said after we'd ordered. What finally changed your mind? I gave him the condensed version of recent events. He listened without interrupting, his expression growing increasingly incredulous. So they're sidelining the architect of their most profitable division because of family politics. He shook his head. Their loss, potentially our gain. I meant what I said at the conference. Vertex needs someone with your vision. I haven't made any decisions yet, I cautioned. I've invested 5 years in Montgomery. That's not easy to walk away from. Alan nodded thoughtfully. I understand. But let me be clear about what Vertex is offering. Complete autonomy over operations, a seat on the board from day one, and equity in the company. We value innovation and results, not family trees. It was everything Montgomery had never given me despite my contributions. Still, I hesitated. I need time to think. And to be honest, I need to understand what walking away would mean for the aerospace division I built at Montgomery. I won't leave my team hanging. I respect that, Alan said, but don't take too long. Opportunities like this don't stay open indefinitely. Back at Montgomery, I found Richard sitting in my office, feet propped on my desk, talking loudly on his phone about shaking things up in aerospace. He barely acknowledged me as I entered, finishing his call before lazily removing his feet from my desk. Olivia, he greeted me with false cheer. Just getting acquainted with the aerospace operations. Quite a mess you've made of the documentation. Very confusing systems you've implemented. I smiled tightly. The systems that secured Montgomery's largest contract in its history and increased company valuation by 40%. Those confusing systems. Well, he shrugged, standing to leave. Sometimes the simplest approaches are best. William and I were discussing a return to basics, fewer bells and whistles, more solid engineering. The Montgomery way. As he sauntered out, I made my decision. I spent the rest of the day downloading copies of all my work, the project plans I'd developed, the quality control systems I'd designed, the client relationships I'd nurtured. All of it legally mine as the creator. All of it about to walk out the door with me. That evening, I drafted 2 letters, my resignation from Montgomery Precision, effective immediately, and my acceptance of Alan Chen's offer at Vertex Innovations. David called again that night, sounding tired after a day of client meetings. How are things going with Richard? He asked cautiously. About as well as you'd expect, I replied. He's planning to dismantle everything I've built in aerospace. Your father's thrilled, I'm sure. Dad just needs time to see that your ways work, David sighed. We knew it wouldn't be easy changing a company with so much history. No, David. I knew it wouldn't be easy. You thought your father would eventually recognize my value. He hasn't, and he won't. And you've never been willing to force the issue. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken truths. What are you saying, Liv? I'm saying I've accepted a position at Vertex Innovations. I start next week. The shock in his voice was almost comical. You're leaving? Just like that? What about us? That's up to you, David. I'm taking control of my career, something I should have done years ago instead of trying to earn your father's approval. You need to decide what matters more to you, your father's version of Montgomery or our marriage. That's not fair. You can't ask me to choose between my family and... I'm your family too, David. At least I thought I was. The next morning, I arrived early to clear out my office, expecting to have the floor to myself. Instead, I found William Montgomery waiting for me, sitting in my chair as if he owned it, which technically he did. I hear congratulations are in order, he said, his voice cold. Vertex Innovations. Very impressive. News traveled fast in our industry. I wasn't surprised he'd already heard. Thank you, I replied, placing my box on the desk and beginning to gather my personal items. I assume my resignation letter reached you as well. It did. Quite abrupt, don't you think? No notice period, no transition plan for your responsibilities. Not very professional. I met his gaze calmly, about as professional as being locked out of my own division and replaced by your nephew without consultation. I believe we're even on professional courtesy. William's jaw tightened. You signed non-compete and confidentiality agreements when you joined Montgomery. I trust you remember the terms. Perfectly, I nodded. No working for direct competitors within a 100-mile radius for 1 year after termination. Vertex's headquarters is in Phoenix, well outside that radius. As for confidentiality, I have no intention of sharing Montgomery's proprietary information. My value to Vertex lies in my skills and vision, not in trade secrets. You think you're very clever, William said, standing slowly. But you've made a critical mistake. David will never choose you over his birthright. Montgomery is in his blood. For the first time in our confrontational history, I felt a wave of pity for William Montgomery. He truly believed his company was the center of everyone's universe, that no one could possibly succeed without the Montgomery name behind them. Maybe you're right, I conceded. But I've made my choice, and now David will make his. Either way, I'll be fine. William scoffed. We'll see how fine you are when Vertex realizes you were just riding on Montgomery's reputation. You have no idea what it takes to succeed in this industry without a legacy behind you. I finished packing my box and picked it up, looking around the office one last time. That's where you're wrong, William. I've never had a legacy to fall back on. Everything I've achieved has been through my own merit, including transforming your stagnating company into a modern competitor. The question isn't whether I can succeed without Montgomery. It's whether Montgomery can succeed without me. I walked out with my head high, sensing William's glare boring into my back. 5 years of frustration and undervaluation were finally behind me. Whatever came next, whether David chose to support me or not, I was free. 6 months later, I stood in my corner office at Vertex Innovations, reviewing the final plans for our new aerospace navigation system. Under my leadership, Vertex had secured 3 major contracts that Montgomery had been pursuing, and our stock had risen 18%. My assistant knocked on the open door. The Montgomery representative is here for your meeting. I took a deep breath. Send them in. The door opened to reveal not the Montgomery sales team I'd expected, but David. He looked different, more confident somehow, his posture straight and decisive in a way I'd rarely seen when his father was in the picture. David, I said, surprised. I was expecting your aerospace sales director. We restructured the department, he replied. I'm handling key accounts personally now. I gestured for him to sit, maintaining a professional distance despite the personal undercurrents. We'd spoken sparingly over the past 6 months, our marriage suspended in a strange limbo while David figured things out. I'd given him space, focusing on building my new life at Vertex. Montgomery wants to propose a partnership on the Stellar project, David continued, pulling out a folder. We have manufacturing capabilities that would complement Vertex's design expertise. I raised an eyebrow. A partnership? That's unexpected. What does your father think of this proposal? David met my gaze steadily. My father no longer makes these decisions. He retired 3 months ago. Retired? I couldn't hide my shock. William Montgomery had always sworn he'd die at his desk rather than retire. After you left, everything you predicted happened. Richard nearly destroyed the aerospace division within weeks. The North Star contract was in jeopardy. Our stock dropped 20%. David's expression hardened. I had to make a choice. What did you do? I called an emergency board meeting and presented the consequences of my father's decisions. I showed them the true numbers, how your leadership had saved Montgomery from irrelevance, and how quickly we were falling without you. I gave them an ultimatum. Either my father and Richard stepped down from operational control, or I would leave and start my own company. I stared at him, barely recognizing this decisive man as the same person who had spent years avoiding conflict with his father. The board sided with me, David continued. Dad agreed to retire to a ceremonial chairman emeritus role. Richard was reassigned to a position more suited to his skills. Meaning? A small smile crossed David's face. He manages our booth at trade shows. Despite everything, I laughed. And now you're here proposing a partnership with the company that hired me away. I'm here because Montgomery needs Vertex's innovation, and Vertex could benefit from Montgomery's manufacturing infrastructure. He paused, and because I finally made the choice I should have made years ago. I chose you, Liv. I'm just hoping it's not too late. I considered him thoughtfully. The past 6 months had been transformative for me. At Vertex, I found the respect and recognition that had eluded me at Montgomery. I built a new life, one where my value wasn't constantly questioned. The partnership proposal has merit, I said finally. I'll review it with our team. And the other part, David asked quietly. That's more complicated, I admitted. I'm not the same person who left Montgomery. I'm not looking to be rescued or brought back into the fold. I'm not trying to rescue you, David said earnestly. I'm trying to earn back your respect. The partnership proposal isn't about bringing you back. It's about showing you that I've changed. That Montgomery has changed. I nodded slowly. I'll need time. Both for the proposal and everything else. I understand. He stood to leave. For what it's worth, you were right about everything. Montgomery wouldn't have survived without your innovations. My father was too proud to admit it, but I'm not. You literally saved our company, then we pushed you out. I'll never make that mistake again. After you left, I stood at my window overlooking the Phoenix skyline, thinking about legacy and value and the unexpected turns life takes. 6 months ago, I had been forced out of a company I helped transform. Now that same company wanted to partner with me, recognizing the worth they had previously dismissed. William Montgomery had been right about one thing. Montgomery was in David's blood. What he hadn't understood was that innovation and progress were in mine. Together, perhaps we could build something stronger than either legacy alone. But whatever happened with David, with Montgomery, with the potential partnership, I knew one truth with absolute certainty. I would never again allow anyone to make me feel small for being exactly who I was. An outsider who saw possibilities others missed, who built success through vision rather than inheritance. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't proving others wrong. It's proving yourself right. The persistent rain outside matched my mood as I stared at the quarterly projections on my screen. Something was wrong. Revenues down 27%, 3 major clients unexpectedly canceling contracts, manufacturing delays that made no logical sense. I ran the numbers again, scrutinizing each line item. This wasn't random market fluctuation. This was deliberate. My name is Elena Farrow, and at 34, I was watching my cousin methodically dismantle the architectural innovation firm my grandfather had built from the ground up. Elena, the executive committee meeting starts in 15 minutes, my assistant Marcus said, knocking lightly on my open door. His usually calm demeanor was strained. Jason has invited the board members. Of course he had. Jason had been orchestrating this for months, positioning himself as the voice of reason while I supposedly drove Farrow design and engineering into the ground. Thanks, Marcus. Is everything set up in the conference room? Yes, but, he hesitated, lowering his voice, there are shareholders I've never seen before, and the legal team wasn't informed of this meeting until an hour ago. I nodded, hiding my surprise. That's fine. Could you make sure my presentation is loaded on the main system? After he left, I unlocked my desk drawer and removed a slim external hard drive. 6 months of evidence that I'd been meticulously collecting piece by piece. Tonight would determine whether my grandfather's legacy survived or if it would be carved up and sold off to the highest bidder. Farrow Design and Engineering was no ordinary architectural firm. My grandfather, Thomas Farrow, had revolutionized sustainable construction technology in the 1980s, when most firms were still focused on aesthetics alone. His patented systems for energy efficiency and waste reduction had transformed the industry. When he passed away 3 years ago, he left me in charge, not my Uncle Richard or his son Jason, both of whom had expected to inherit control. The firm needs innovation, not tradition, grandfather had written in his will. Elena understands that the future must be built, not inherited. Uncle Richard had resigned from the board within weeks, but Jason had stayed, smiling, congratulating me, and immediately beginning his campaign of sabotage. I slipped the hard drive into my pocket and picked up my tablet, scrolling through the secure message from our Tokyo office that had arrived yesterday. Documentation complete. All records secured. Supporting you all the way. A final text arrived from my brother Lucas. In position. Ready when you are. I straightened my suit jacket and headed for the conference room. Time to end this. The room fell silent as I entered. Jason sat at the head of the table, my grandfather's former place and now rightfully mine, looking immaculate in a custom suit, exuding concerned professionalism. Board members lined both sides of the table, along with several unfamiliar faces that I assumed were the shareholders Marcus had mentioned. Ah, Elena, thank you for joining us, Jason said, his voice perfectly calibrated to convey both authority and regret. I know this must be difficult. Not at all, I replied, taking the only open seat, purposely positioned at the far end of the table. Though I am curious about why this meeting was called without proper notification to all executive officers. The situation required immediate action, Jason responded smoothly. Farrow Design is in crisis, and every day we delay addressing it puts the company at greater risk. He gestured to the screen behind him, where grim financial projections glowed in accusatory red. As you can all see, he continued, under the current leadership, Faro has experienced unprecedented decline. Our stock has fallen 32% in 9 months. We've lost major clients, including the Singapore Green Tower project and the Toronto waterfront development. Our reputation, built over 3 generations, is eroding rapidly. Murmurs spread around the table. I noticed Jason's father, my Uncle Richard, sitting quietly in the corner of the room, not at the table but positioned like a spectator at a show he'd already seen in rehearsal. I've prepared a detailed analysis, Jason continued, clicking through slides of declining metrics, each one carefully selected to paint the bleakest possible picture. The evidence is clear. We need an immediate change in leadership to save Faro Design. He paused, letting the gravity of the situation sink in before delivering his final blow. Therefore, I move that we vote to remove Elena Faro as CEO, effective immediately, and install an emergency management committee to stabilize the company while we evaluate strategic options. Strategic options, the polite corporate term for selling off the most valuable parts of a company while discarding the rest. Several board members who had known me since childhood couldn't meet my eyes. They'd been prepared for this, coached on how to vote. The unknown shareholders leaned forward eagerly, like vultures sensing a meal. Before we vote, I said calmly, I'd like to share some information that's relevant to this discussion. Jason's smile remained fixed, but his eyes hardened. Elena, the financial documents speak for themselves. This isn't the time for emotional appeals about your grandfather's vision. Oh, this isn't about my grandfather's vision, I replied, connecting my tablet to the room's display system. This is about fraud, corporate sabotage, and a conspiracy to artificially devalue Faro Design. The screen changed, now showing a very different set of data. Internal emails between Jason and several offshore entities, documenting systematic efforts to delay our projects and undermine client relationships. What is this? One of the board members asked, leaning forward to examine the screen. Evidence, I said simply. For the past 9 months, someone has been deliberately sabotaging Faro's projects, creating delays, introducing errors into designs, and interfering with client communications. I clicked to the next slide. Our Tokyo office has provided documentation showing unauthorized changes to the Mori Tower project specifications, changes that came from Jason's computer. This is absurd, Jason interrupted, his composure slipping. You're manufacturing evidence to cover your own incompetence. Ms. Chen, I said, addressing our chief financial officer, who had been silently observing until now. Could you confirm whether these financial discrepancies match the inconsistencies you've been investigating? Lydia Chen, who had worked alongside my grandfather for 20 years, nodded firmly. They do. I've been tracking irregularities in our reporting for months. These documents appear to explain the source. The room erupted in confused conversation. I used the moment to signal Marcus, who opened the door to admit Lucas, my brother and our company's chief technology officer, who had been working remotely for the past 6 months, supposedly overseeing our West Coast operations. In reality, he'd been conducting a forensic investigation of our internal systems, tracking the digital breadcrumbs of Jason's sabotage. The server logs don't lie, Lucas announced, connecting his own device to the display. We've documented over 200 instances of unauthorized access to client files, project timelines, and financial reports, all traced back to 3 IP addresses. He brought up a new screen showing the digital evidence, one at Jason's home, one at a property owned by his father, and one at an office registered to this company. Lucas projected the corporate registration of a newly formed entity, Paradigm Partners, LLC. Interesting timing, I noted that Paradigm Partners was incorporated just 1 day after my grandfather's will was read. I turned to the unfamiliar faces at the table, and even more interesting that the primary shareholders of Paradigm Partners are sitting in this room right now, invited by Jason to vote on Faro's future. The unknown shareholders shifted uncomfortably, their predatory eagerness replaced by nervous glances. This is a desperate attempt to maintain control, Jason snapped, standing abruptly. These documents could be fabricated. The board has already seen the truth. The company is failing under your leadership. Is it? I pulled up another document, because according to our actual numbers, the ones not manipulated to create panic, our underlying business remains strong. Those lost clients, they didn't leave willingly. They were systematically misinformed and mismanaged until they had no choice but to go elsewhere. I looked directly at the board members who had known me since childhood. You all knew my grandfather. You know the principles on which he built this company: integrity, innovation, and sustainability, not just in our designs but in how we operate. What you've witnessed over the past 9 months wasn't failure of leadership. It was a calculated attempt to steal control of Faro Design. The silence in the room was thick with tension. Jason remained standing, but his confident posture had crumbled. You can't prove any of this, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Actually, I smiled. I can. And there's one more thing you should know. I nodded to Lydia Chen, who distributed a document to each board member. While you were busy manipulating reports and sabotaging projects, I was securing our core intellectual property. Faro's most valuable patents, including the new carbon capture building skin that grandfather was developing before he died, have been transferred to a separate holding company controlled exclusively by a trust dedicated to maintaining Thomas Faro's innovation legacy. Jason's face drained of color as he understood the implications. Without those patents, Faro Design would be worth a fraction of what his buyers were expecting. That's corporate theft, he stammered. You can't just transfer company assets. Actually, she can, came a new voice from the doorway. Harrison Wells, our longtime legal counsel, entered carrying a thick folder. Thomas Faro's will include specific provisions granting Elena the authority to protect core intellectual property in the event of a hostile action against the company. We've been monitoring the situation for months, waiting for the right moment. He dropped the folder on the table. Everything was done legally and properly. The patents are protected and can only be used by Faro Design as long as it remains true to its founding principles. Ladies and gentlemen, I address the board. We have a choice to make today. We can allow Faro Design to be dismantled by people who see it only as assets to be stripped and sold. Or we can recommit to the vision that made us industry leaders in the first place. I turned to Jason. I move that we vote to remove Jason Faro from any position within this company, effective immediately, and to begin legal proceedings to recover damages caused by his systematic sabotage. The vote wasn't even close. The aftermath was exactly as chaotic as I had expected. Security escorted Jason and Uncle Richard from the building while the board convened an emergency session to assess the full extent of the damage. The unknown shareholders, Jason's potential buyers, disappeared as quickly as they had arrived. 2 days later, I stood before our assembled employees in the main atrium of our headquarters. The past 9 months have been challenging, I began, looking out at the faces of people who had weathered a storm they didn't fully understand until now. Many of you noticed things weren't right, designs being changed after approval, communications getting lost, decisions that didn't make sense. Nods spread throughout the crowd. Today, I want to be completely transparent about what happened and, more importantly, where we're going from here. Over the next hour, I explained everything: Jason's sabotage, the evidence we'd uncovered, and most importantly, our plan moving forward. Every project would be reviewed, every client personally contacted, every process examined to prevent something like this from happening again. Faro Design was built on the idea that architecture should enhance life, not just contain it, I concluded. Those values aren't just marketing points. They're our foundation, and we're going to rebuild stronger than ever. The response was overwhelming, not just applause, but a palpable sense of relief and renewed purpose that spread through the room. As people filed out, many stopped to share stories of frustrations they'd experienced, irregularities they'd noticed but hadn't known how to address. Marcus approached me after the meeting. The Tokyo team sent their congratulations and final documentation, he said, handing me a sealed envelope. They said you'd know what to do with it. Inside was detailed evidence of exactly how Jason had interfered with the Mori Tower project, including timestamps and records of every unauthorized change, the final piece of our legal case against him. That evening, I found Lucas and grandfather's old workshop on the top floor of the building. My workshop now. He was examining the prototype of the carbon capture building skin that would revolutionize urban air quality if we could perfect it. Grandfather would have seen through Jason from day one, wouldn't he? Lucas asked as I joined him. Probably, I agreed, running my fingers over the intricate surface of the prototype. He had a sixth sense about people's motivations. I should have noticed sooner, Lucas said quietly. All those system irregularities, the pattern of mistakes that weren't random at all. We all should have, I acknowledged. But Jason was clever. He made each incident seem isolated, reasonable, just bad luck or normal business challenges. It was only when you looked at the whole picture that the pattern became clear. Lucas turned to me, his expression serious. Jason's already hired lawyers. They're claiming we engineered the whole thing to force him out. I nodded, unsurprised. Let them come. We have the evidence, and more importantly, we have the truth. And the patents, Lucas added with a slight smile. And the patents, I agreed. 6 months later, Faro Design and Engineering unveiled its first major project since the attempted takeover. A revolutionary mixed-use development in Detroit that incorporated all of our most advanced sustainable technologies, including the now perfected carbon capture exterior that actively purified surrounding air. The project garnered international attention and brought in a flood of new clients eager to work with the firm that was redefining sustainable architecture. Our stock price had more than recovered, employee morale was at an all-time high, and the legal proceedings against Jason had resulted in a settlement that included a public acknowledgement of his actions. On the 1-year anniversary of the board meeting that had changed everything, I invited the entire company to a celebration in the newly renovated main lobby, where we unveiled a simple plaque. The future must be built, not inherited. Thomas Faro. As champagne flowed and conversation hummed around me, I found myself standing before the architectural model of our Detroit project, admiring the miniature version of what we had accomplished. He would be proud, said a familiar voice behind me. I turned to find Lydia Chen, who had worked alongside my grandfather for so many years. Not just of saving the company, she continued, but of how you did it. Thomas always said the true test of a design isn't just whether it stands, but whether it improves the lives of those who interact with it. I smiled, thinking of all we had overcome and all that still lay ahead. We're not done yet, I told her. There's still so much to build. And that, ultimately, was the greatest victory. Jason had tried to reduce my grandfather's legacy to assets on a balance sheet, pieces to be sold to the highest bidder. Instead, he had only succeeded in proving why the Faro name would endure long after his schemes were forgotten. Because while Jason had been focused on what he could tear down, we had never stopped imagining what we could build up. I never thought I'd become famous for a dish I didn't create, but that's exactly what happened, and the journey nearly cost me everything I cared about. My name is Eliza Chen, and 5 years ago, I married into the Rossi family, a tight-knit Italian-American clan with 3 generations of history in the restaurant business. My husband Marco was the black sheep who'd walked away from the family business to become an architect, much to his father Antonio's dismay. Food is in our blood, Antonio would say whenever Marco's career came up. 27 years I spent building this restaurant, and my only son decides to draw buildings instead of making something people can actually enjoy. Despite the tension, we had family dinner at Rossi's every Sunday, a tradition Marco insisted we maintain. I'd sit there between Marco's sisters Sophia and Lucia, both of whom worked at the restaurant, trying to navigate the complex web of family dynamics while Antonio regaled everyone with stories of the early days. The restaurant was undeniably successful. Rossi's Italian Bistro had been featured in food magazines and had lines out the door most weekends. The crown jewel of their menu was Nana's secret ragu, a family recipe passed down from Marco's grandmother that customers raved about. My relationship with the family was cordial but distant until the day I made an innocent suggestion. Have you ever thought about bottling Nana's ragu for retail? I asked during one Sunday dinner. People could enjoy it at home between restaurant visits. The table fell silent. Marco winced beside me. That recipe stays in this kitchen, Antonio replied firmly. My mother made me promise never to mass produce it. Quality can't be maintained in a factory. I nodded and dropped the subject, but the wheels were already turning in my head. I had a background in marketing before switching to freelance food photography, and I could see the untapped potential. A few weeks later, I broached the subject again, this time with a full presentation. Sales projections, marketing concepts, limited production to maintain quality control. I'd done my homework. We could start small, I explained as the family gathered in the restaurant after hours. Local gourmet shops, then regional expansion if it takes off. The recipe would remain exactly the same. Sylvia seemed intrigued. Lucia was skeptical but open to discussion. Marco's mother, Maria, was quietly supportive, but Antonio shut it down immediately. Absolutely not, he said, his voice hard. You come into this family for 5 minutes and think you can change how we've done business for decades. This isn't a marketing exercise, Eliza. This is our heritage. I'm not trying to change your heritage, I replied, stung by his dismissal. I'm suggesting a way to share it with more people, and yes, make more money for the family in the process. Antonio stood up, towering over the table. Money isn't everything. Loyalty is everything. Tradition is everything. He turned to Marco. Control your wife. She doesn't understand our ways. I felt my face flush with anger and embarrassment. Marco put his hand on mine under the table, but said nothing to defend me. The discussion was over. On the drive home, I finally broke the silence. You just sat there while he insulted me. Marco sighed. You don't understand how he works. Pushing only makes him more stubborn. He'll never agree to bottling Nana's sauce. It was a good idea, I insisted. A great idea that could secure the restaurant's legacy for another generation. Maybe, Marco conceded, but it's not our decision to make. I let it go, outwardly at least, but I couldn't shake the conviction that the Rossi family was missing out on something transformative. 3 months later, life took an unexpected turn. Marco's firm won a major project in Singapore that required him to relocate for at least a year. The timing was terrible. I was just starting to build a steady client base for my food photography, but we agreed it was too important to pass up. Come with me, Marco pleaded. I can't abandon my clients, I replied. I've worked too hard to establish myself. We compromised. I would stay behind for 6 months to fulfill my existing contracts and build a portfolio that could transfer internationally. Then I would join him in Singapore. The first month apart was difficult but manageable. I threw myself into work, taking on as many projects as possible. One of those projects was for an upscale local grocery chain launching a new artisan Italian line of products. They needed food photography and had been referred to me by a previous client. During the shoot, I struck up a conversation with their product development manager, Diane. The pasta looks amazing, I said as I adjusted my lighting setup, but the sauce is a bit generic. Have you considered something more authentic? We've been searching for the right sauce for months, Diane admitted. Everything either tastes mass-produced or is too expensive for our price point. An idea formed in my mind, dangerous but potentially perfect. I hesitated for only a moment. I might have a solution, I said carefully, a traditional family recipe that's absolutely incredible. It's not mine to share fully, but I could create something inspired by it, capturing the essence while making it my home. Diane was immediately interested. Could you develop a sample for us to try? I had watched Antonio's mother make the sauce dozens of times before she passed away last year. I'd observed the process, noted the ingredients, even helped chop herbs and vegetables on occasion. I didn't have the exact recipe, but I had a photographer's eye for detail and a decent palate. Over the next 2 weeks, I experimented in my kitchen, trying to recreate the magic of Nana's ragu. My version wasn't identical. I deliberately made certain changes to respect the family's ownership of the original, but it captured the spirit of the sauce. Rich, complex, with that distinctive something that made people close their eyes when they tasted it. When I presented it to Diane, her reaction confirmed I created something special. This is exactly what we've been looking for, she said after tasting it. Would you be willing to license this recipe to us? We'd brand it as Eliza's rustic ragu or something similar. The offer was generous, a substantial upfront payment plus ongoing royalties. It would provide financial security while Marco and I were abroad, maybe even allow me to be more selective with photography clients. And most importantly, it wasn't actually Nana's recipe. It was my interpretation, my creation. I accepted the offer without telling Marco or his family. I rationalized that it wasn't a betrayal since my sauce was different enough to be its own product. Besides, Antonio had made it clear that the Rossi family had no interest in retail ventures. I wasn't taking anything from them. I was creating something new that happened to be inspired by their tradition. The sauce launched 3 months later to unexpected success. Eliza's rustic ragu became the top-selling product in the grocery chain's new Italian line. Food bloggers wrote about it. A local magazine did a small feature on me as an up-and-coming food entrepreneur. And that's when everything fell apart. Sophia saw the magazine while getting her hair done. Within hours, the entire Rossi family knew. Marco called from Singapore, his voice tight with shock and anger. "How could you do this behind my back?" he demanded. "My father is livid." "It's not Nana's recipe," I protested. "I created my own version." "That's not the point. You knew this would hurt my family. You knew my father's feelings about the family sauce. Your father made his feelings clear about the family sauce. This isn't that sauce. This is my sauce." The distinction didn't matter to the Rosses. To them, I had stolen their heritage, their grandmother's legacy, and monetized it against their explicit wishes. Antonio was threatening legal action. Lucia had blocked my number. Even Maria, who had always been kind to me, was devastated by what she saw as a betrayal. The next Sunday, I went to the family dinner alone. It was the most uncomfortable meal of my life. Antonio wouldn't look at me. Sophia and Lucia sat as far from me as possible. Only Maria attempted conversation, though her eyes were sad. "I didn't steal your recipe," I said when I couldn't bear the silence any longer. "I created something new inspired by what I learned in this family." "You took our grandmother's legacy and sold it to strangers," Sophia replied coldly. "No, I created my own legacy when you refused to expand yours." Antonio finally spoke, his voice low and controlled. "You are not family. You will never understand what this means to us." Those words cut deeper than he knew. Ever since marrying Marco, I had tried to find my place in the Rossi family. I had learned their traditions, celebrated their holidays, even started learning Italian. But in their eyes, I would always be an outsider. I left the restaurant knowing something fundamental had broken. That night, Marco and I had the most difficult conversation of our marriage. "They're my family, Eliza," he said, his voice tinny over the video call. "I'm trapped in the middle of this, and it's tearing me apart." "I'm your family too," I reminded him. "And I didn't do anything wrong. I saw an opportunity they refused to consider, and I created something of my own. By using knowledge you gain from them. Knowledge freely shared in a family kitchen. I didn't steal a written recipe or corporate secrets." We went around in circles until exhaustion forced us to stop. Nothing was resolved. The chasm between us seemed to widen with each passing day. Marco was under tremendous pressure from his family to make things right, though nobody could define what that meant. Meanwhile, the sauce continued to gain popularity. The grocery chain wanted to expand distribution. A major food magazine requested an interview about my journey from photographer to food creator. The success felt hollow without Marco's support. But I wasn't willing to give it up either. This was my creation, my achievement. 3 months into our separation, with 3 months left before I was supposed to join Marco in Singapore, I received a formal letter from a lawyer representing Rossi's Italian bistro. They were claiming my sauce violated their trade secrets and demanding I cease production immediately. It was a weak legal argument. I genuinely hadn't copied their exact recipe, but fighting it would be expensive and emotionally draining. More importantly, it forced me to confront the real cost of what was happening. Was this sauce worth losing my marriage? Worth causing a permanent rift between Marco and his family? I called Marco that night, expecting another argument. Instead, I found him subdued and thoughtful. "I've been thinking about this situation from every angle," he said, "and I realized something important." "What's that?" "My grandmother was an innovator. Everyone talks about preserving her legacy, but they forget that she constantly experimented, adapted recipes from her village, created new dishes. The ragu itself was her adaptation of something traditional." I held my breath, afraid to interrupt this unexpected shift. "What you did," he continued, "was actually very much in her spirit. You took inspiration and created something new. My father talks about tradition, but he's frozen it in amber instead of letting it evolve." Tears pricked at my eyes. "That means a lot to me, Marco, but your family doesn't see it that way." "No, they don't," he agreed. "Not yet. But I have an idea that might change everything." Marco's plan was both simple and radical. Create a new sauce together that explicitly honored Nana while being distinctly different from both her original recipe and my current product. We would develop it collaboratively with Antonio and Maria, giving them creative control while I contributed my marketing expertise. The profits would establish a culinary scholarship in Nana's name. It was a beautiful vision, but I was skeptical the Rosses would even consider it. Marco asked me to trust him. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in the Rossi's kitchen, not the restaurant kitchen, but the home kitchen where the family actually lived and ate. Marco had flown back from Singapore for this meeting. Antonio and Maria sat across from us, faces unreadable. Before you say anything, Marco began, I want you to taste something. He placed 4 small jars on the table, one containing Nana's original sauce from the restaurant, one with my commercial product, and 2 unmarked jars. These last 2 are new, he explained. One is a recipe Eliza and I developed together over video calls this past week. The other is something I found in Nana's recipe box that she labeled Ragu Nuvo, her experiment that she never served at the restaurant. Antonio's eyebrows rose slightly at this revelation. Maria nodded as if confirming a memory. She was always tinkering, Maria said softly, even in her final years. We tasted all 4 sauces in silence. The differences were subtle but distinct. Nana's original was perfect in its traditional execution. My commercial version was brighter, with more herbs. The version Marco and I had created together somehow captured elements of both while introducing a deeper, more complex flavor profile. And Nana's experiment, her new ragu, was the most surprising of all. Lighter, with unexpected notes of citrus and a hint of spice. She was trying something completely different, Antonio said, wonder creeping into his voice as he tasted his mother's experiment. All these years and I never knew. Because she knew you valued tradition above all else, Marco replied gently. But she was an artist, Papa. Artists never stop creating. Antonio was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at me directly for the first time in months. You should not have gone behind our backs, he said firmly. That was wrong. I nodded, accepting the criticism. But he continued, perhaps we have been too rigid. My mother, it seems, was not afraid of new ideas. It wasn't immediate forgiveness, but it was an opening. Over the next few hours, we talked more honestly than ever before. About family legacy, about innovation versus tradition, about belonging and outsider status. The conversation was difficult but necessary. By evening, we had the outline of a plan. The grocery chain would continue selling Eliza's rustic ragu, with a percentage of profits going to the culinary scholarship. Meanwhile, the Rossi family would launch a premium line of restaurant sauces for retail, including both Nana's original recipe, finally, and a new Rossi family reserve that Marco and I would develop with Antonio and Maria. It wasn't a perfect resolution. Sofia and Lucia remained cool toward me. Antonio still had moments of stubborn resistance to change. But it was progress. A year later, the Rossi retail line launched to critical acclaim. The jarred version of Nana's original sauce won a specialty food award. The scholarship in her name had its first recipient, a young chef from the same Italian village where she had been born. Marco and I eventually returned from Singapore and bought a house halfway between our apartment and his parents' home. The physical distance seemed appropriate, close enough for regular family dinners, far enough to maintain our independence. One Sunday, as we all gathered around the table at Rossi's, Antonio raised his glass for a toast. To family, he said, looking around the table. His gaze lingered on me for a moment before adding, all of our family, and to my mother, who taught us that tradition is not what you preserve, it's what you nourish so it can grow. I felt Marco squeeze my hand under the table as we all clinked glasses. The sauce that had nearly torn us apart had ultimately forced us to create something better. A genuine family bond based on mutual respect rather than blind obedience to tradition. Sometimes the most important family recipe isn't about food at all. It's about finding the right balance of honoring the past while creating space for something new to flourish. Sometimes the people who are supposed to be family turn out to be your worst enemies. That's a lesson I learned the hard way. My name is Olivia, and I've been married to Marcus for 6 years. We've built a good life together despite the constant shadow of his father, Richard, looming over us. Marcus works as a geological engineer for an international mining company, which means he's often away on projects for weeks at a time, sometimes in remote locations with spotty communication. It's not ideal, but we make it work. Or at least we did, until Richard decided to insert himself more aggressively into our lives. The trouble started when Marcus's grandfather passed away 2 years ago. Grandpa Joe had been the family patriarch, a kind but formidable man who built a successful construction business from nothing. In his will, he left his Victorian home, a beautiful historic property that had been in the family for generations, to Marcus. "He always had a soft spot for you," Richard had said at the reading of the will, his voice tight with barely concealed anger. "Even though I'm his son and you're just his grandson." I could sense Richard's resentment from across the room. He'd always assumed the house would go to him. Instead, it went to the grandson who had spent countless weekends helping the elderly man maintain the property, who had listened to his stories, and who had genuinely cared for him. Marcus and I were living in a small apartment at the time, saving for a house of our own. Grandpa Joe's gift was unexpected but welcome. The house needed work, the plumbing was ancient, the electrical system questionable, but it had character and history. Marcus loved it, and so did I. Richard, however, couldn't accept it. "That house should have gone to me," he'd say whenever we saw him. "I'm family, you're just passing through." I never understood what he meant by that until he elaborated one evening after too many drinks. "Marriage doesn't make you family," he told me, jabbing a finger in my direction. "Blood makes you family." And if Marcus had any sense, he'd realize that house belongs to the Henderson bloodline, not to some woman who could divorce him tomorrow. Marcus defended me, of course. He always did. But it created a rift between father and son that only widened over time. Richard became increasingly hostile, especially when Marcus was away for work. He'd show up unannounced, inspect the property like he was conducting an audit, and make snide comments about my housekeeping or decorating choices. "My mother would be rolling in her grave if she saw what you've done to her sitting room," he'd say, or "This house deserves better than this cheap furniture." I tried to be respectful. Richard was Marcus's father, after all. But it was exhausting to constantly defend my right to exist in my own home. Then Richard's new wife, Deborah, entered the picture. 20 years his junior and transparently interested in his money. She took one look at our house and decided she wanted it. "This would be perfect for us, Richard," she said during their first visit. "So much more suited to entertaining than that boring modern house you have." I saw the spark in Richard's eyes. He'd found an ally. From that day forward, it became a campaign. Richard and Deborah would visit while Marcus was away, ostensibly to check on me, but really to criticize and intimidate. They measured rooms, discussed renovation plans in front of me, and even brought fabric swatches for curtains. "I'm thinking burgundy for the dining room," Deborah would say, "once we get rid of these hideous cream walls." I called Marcus after particularly bad visits, but there was little he could do from remote mining sites. He'd call his father, they'd argue, and nothing would change. Then came the ultimatum. Richard and Deborah arrived one Saturday morning while Marcus was in Chile. Richard didn't bother with pleasantries. "We've decided it's time for you to move," he announced, standing in my foyer like he owned the place. "Deborah and I will be taking over the house. It's what's best for the family." I was stunned. "This is our house, Richard. Marcus inherited it legally." "He inherited it because my father was going senile," Richard snapped. "Marcus manipulated an old man. But I'm willing to be generous. We'll give you 3 weeks to find somewhere else to live." Deborah nodded enthusiastically. "And don't worry about all this furniture," she added with a dismissive wave. "We'll be replacing most of it anyway." I felt my temper rise but kept my voice level. "I'm not moving anywhere. This is my home." Richard's face darkened. "This is a Henderson family home. You're just a temporary occupant." "I'm Marcus's wife. That makes me family." Richard laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "Marriage is just a piece of paper. This house belongs to Henderson blood, not to some childless woman who contributes nothing to the family legacy." That hurt more than I wanted to admit. Marcus and I had been trying for a baby for 2 years without success. It was a private pain that Richard had somehow discovered and weaponized. "Get out," I said quietly. "You get out," Deborah shot back. "We're moving in next weekend. Pack your things or we'll pack them for you." They left, slamming the door behind them. I immediately called Marcus, but couldn't reach him. His team was in a remote area with no cell service. I was on my own. For the next week, Richard and Deborah escalated their campaign. They sent moving companies to the house with instructions to pack up my belongings. When I refused to let them in, they threatened legal action. They told neighbors they were helping poor Olivia relocate after Marcus and I had separated. A complete lie. They even changed the gardening service without my knowledge, sending strangers to measure the yard for improvements. I was at my breaking point when Marcus finally called. They did what? He exploded when I explained the situation. That's insane. It's our house. Your father doesn't see it that way, I said warily. He thinks I'm a temporary problem that will eventually go away. There was a long pause, then Marcus said, maybe we should. Should what? Go away. Not permanently, but I've been offered a position managing a new site in New Zealand. It's a 2-year contract, great pay, and I wouldn't be traveling nearly as much. I was going to discuss it with you when I got home, but now it sounds like an escape hatch. I finished. Exactly. We could rent out the house to tenants with a rock-solid lease. Dad couldn't intimidate a property management company the way he tries to intimidate you. I considered it. The idea of being thousands of miles from Richard and Deborah was appealing. So was having Marcus home more regularly. But something about retreating didn't sit right with me. I don't want to let them win, I said. This house meant something to your grandfather. He wanted us to have it. I know, Marcus sighed, but Grandpa Joe also wouldn't want you being harassed while I'm away. Let me think about how to handle this. I'll be home in 3 days. But Richard and Deborah didn't wait 3 days. They showed up the next morning with a small moving truck and 3 burly men. We're here to help you move out, Richard announced cheerfully when I answered the door. These gentlemen will pack everything for you. Very professional service. I blocked the doorway. You're not coming in. Deborah rolled her eyes. Don't be difficult, Olivia. This is happening whether you like it or not. Actually, it's not, I replied, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. This is my home. I'm not leaving, and if you try to force your way in, I'll call the police. Richard's fake smile vanished. Listen to me carefully, he said, lowering his voice. You're nothing. Just a temporary inconvenience. That house belongs to my family, and I'm taking it back. Now step aside. He moved to push past me, but I held my ground. In that moment, something shifted inside me. All the accumulated frustration, fear, and anger crystallized into a cold, clear resolve. Richard, I said quietly, if you take one more step, I will make you regret it for the rest of your life. He hesitated, perhaps detecting the steel in my voice. Then, with a dismissive snort, he shoved me aside and stepped into the foyer. I took out my phone and pressed play. Richard's voice filled the room. This house belongs to my family, and I'm taking it back. Then my voice. Are you threatening to force your way into my home? His again. I'll do whatever it takes to get what's mine. That old fool should have left the house to me, not Marcus. I'm entitled to it. Richard froze, his face draining of color as the recording continued, capturing every threatening statement, every admission of entitlement, every dismissal of his father's legal will. What is that? He demanded. Insurance, I replied. Every time you visited in the last month, I've recorded our conversations. I have hours of you threatening me, planning to forcibly remove me from my legal residence, and discussing how to circumvent your father's will. Would you like to hear more? He lunged for the phone, but I stepped back. I have copies, Richard. Multiple copies stored safely with friends and my lawyer. And if you don't leave right now, the next people who hear these recordings will be the police. Richard's face contorted with rage. You manipulative. Careful, I interrupted. The recording is still running. Deborah tugged at Richard's arm. Let's go, she whispered urgently. We can figure this out later. The moving men, clearly uncomfortable with the situation, were already backing toward their truck. Richard glared at me with pure hatred, but he allowed Deborah to pull him toward the door. This isn't over, he hissed. Actually, it is, I replied. Don't come back, Richard. Don't call. Don't contact us in any way. If you do, these recordings go public. How would your business partners react to hearing you plot to forcibly evict your son's wife? How would your country club friends feel about your true character? After they left, I sank to the floor, shaking with adrenaline. I wasn't sure if my bluff would hold. The recordings existed, but they weren't as extensive as I'd implied. Still, it had worked for now. When Marcus returned 3 days later, I told him everything. He was furious with his father, but proud of how I'd handled the situation. I should have been here, he said, holding me close. "I'm so sorry you had to deal with this alone." "Not anymore," I replied. "We face this together now." We discussed our options and made a decision. First, Marcus formally cut ties with his father, sending a letter through our lawyer explaining exactly why. Then we accepted the job in New Zealand, not as an escape, but as an opportunity. We wouldn't rent the house, though. We had a better idea. A month later, we signed paperwork establishing the Joseph Henderson Historical Home Foundation, named after Marcus's grandfather. The house would become a small museum highlighting local history and offering educational programs for schools. We'd live in a caretaker's cottage on the property when we returned from New Zealand, overseeing the foundation. Richard was livid when he found out. He threatened to contest the will again, to sue us for defamation, to expose Marcus as an ungrateful son. Our lawyer calmly mentioned the recordings, and suddenly Richard became much more reasonable. The foundation was a success. The local historical society was thrilled to help develop programming, and Marcus's distant cousins, who had always disliked Richard's domineering ways, volunteered as docents. Even Richard's sister, long estranged from her brother, came forward to donate family photographs and documents. From New Zealand, we watched our home transform into something meaningful for the entire community. It wasn't what Grandpa Joe had envisioned when he left us the house, but we thought he'd approve. The Henderson legacy wasn't about ownership or control. It was about contribution and connection. As for Richard and Deborah, they eventually divorced. Without the prospect of acquiring the historic home, Deborah quickly lost interest in a man twice her age. Richard retreated to Florida, rarely contacting anyone from his former life. Marcus and I thrived in New Zealand. The work was fascinating, we made wonderful friends, and after years of trying, we finally welcomed our daughter, Josephine, named after the grandfather who had given us not just a house, but a foundation for our future. When we eventually returned to the United States, we moved into the caretaker's cottage as planned. It was smaller than the main house but perfect for our little family. On warm evenings, we'd sit on the porch watching visitors explore the gardens that Grandpa Joe had lovingly tended for decades. "Do you ever regret it?" Marcus asked me one night, "turning our home into a public space?" I looked at our daughter playing on a quilt spread across the lawn, and at the historic home glowing in the sunset, windows lit from within as the last tour of the day concluded. "Never," I said honestly. "It's still our home. We just share it differently now." Marcus squeezed my hand. "Grandpa Joe used to say that a house is just a building until you fill it with purpose." "I think we found ours," I replied, watching as a young family took photos on the front steps, creating memories in a place that had nearly been consumed by one man's bitterness. Sometimes the legacy you build isn't the one you initially imagined. Sometimes it's bigger, reaches further, touches more lives. And sometimes standing your ground isn't about keeping others out. It's about creating something worth protecting in the first place. Is this really what you think qualifies as professional work? My father-in-law tossed my presentation across the conference table, papers scattering like autumn leaves. "This is why women shouldn't handle important accounts." The words hung in the air of the executive boardroom. No one spoke. The other directors, all men, all friends of my father-in-law, studied their notepads with sudden interest. "I spent 3 weeks researching that proposal," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the humiliation burning my cheeks. "The client specifically requested innovative approaches, which is exactly what I delivered." Richard Parker, founder and CEO of Parker Financial Advisors, adjusted his gold cufflinks and smiled with practiced condescension. "Natalie, dear, clients say they want innovation, but what they actually want is security. 30 years in this business has taught me that." My husband Daniel, sitting beside his father, cleared his throat. "Dad's right, Nat. Maybe stick to the smaller accounts while you learn the ropes." I was 34 years old with an MBA from Wharton and 7 years of experience before joining the family firm. There were no ropes left for me to learn. "The Westbrook account is mine," I stated firmly. I brought them in. They specifically asked for me to handle their portfolio. "And now I'm specifically telling you that Harrison will take over," Richard replied, nodding toward his nephew who had joined the firm straight out of his undergraduate program just 18 months ago. "This discussion is closed." I gathered my scattered presentation while the meeting moved on to other matters. This wasn't the first time Richard had undermined me since I joined Parker Financial 3 years ago, shortly after marrying Daniel. It wouldn't be the last. At home that evening, I tried again to make Daniel understand. Your father deliberately humiliated me in front of the entire board. He's been sabotaging my work since day one. Daniel loosened his tie and poured himself a scotch. You're being dramatic. Dad's tough on everyone. It's how he built the company. He's not tough on Harrison, or on you. Just on me. That's different. We're family. I'm family too, Daniel. I'm your wife. He took a long sip before answering. It's not the same. You're family by marriage, not by blood. There's a difference. The words stung more than they should have. I'd heard variations of this sentiment from Richard countless times, but hearing it from my husband cut deeper. So I'll never truly be part of the inner circle, is that it? I asked. Daniel sighed, the sound heavy with impatience. Look, just try harder to fit in. Follow the established protocols. Stop trying to reinvent everything. The established protocols are outdated. We're losing younger clients to more progressive firms. Dad knows what he's doing, Daniel insisted. The firm's been successful for 3 decades following his methods. I gave up trying to make him understand. Daniel had spent his entire life in his father's shadow, seeking approval that always seemed just out of reach. He couldn't see the manipulation, couldn't recognize that Richard's tough love was actually toxic control. The next morning, I arrived at the office early to find Richard already in my office, going through my files. Can I help you with something? I asked from the doorway. He didn't even pretend to be embarrassed at being caught. Just reviewing the Johnson portfolio. Harrison mentioned you've been suggesting some unconventional investment strategies. Harrison should be discussing my clients with you behind my back. Richard straightened, fixing me with a cold stare. Everything in this firm is my business. The sooner you understand that, the better. As he brushed past me, he added, We're having dinner at our house tonight. Eleanor is expecting you at 7. Don't be late. It wasn't an invitation but a command. My mother-in-law Eleanor's dinners were elaborate affairs designed to showcase her perfect home, perfect cooking, and perfect family. They were also opportunities for Richard to continue his criticism under the guise of friendly conversation. Actually, I have plans tonight. I lied. Richard stopped, turning slowly. Cancel them. Family comes first at Parker Financial. His tone made it clear. This was another test of loyalty that I was already failing. I arrived at their mansion at precisely 7 o'clock that evening. Eleanor greeted me with air kisses and insincere compliments about my dress before immediately criticizing the way I'd styled my hair. It's so severe pulled back like that, she said, reaching to loosen a strand. Daniel likes softer women. That's why his college girlfriend Jessica was always so perfect for him. I stepped away from her touch. Daniel married me, not Jessica. Eleanor's smile remained fixed. Yes, well, decisions made in haste often need adjustment over time. The dinner was predictably uncomfortable. Richard dominated the conversation, frequently referencing company matters that had been handled before your time, Natalie, or that were beyond your current understanding of our business model. When I attempted to discuss the innovative portfolio strategy I developed for a new tech industry client, Richard cut me off. Let's not bore everyone with technical details, he said dismissively. I'm not bored, Daniel's sister Rachel surprised me by saying. I'd like to hear more about Natalie's strategy. Richard's glare silenced her immediately. The rest of the meal continued with discussions about family vacations I hadn't been part of and childhood memories I couldn't share. I was a perpetual outsider at this table, and the message was clear. I always would be. Later that week, I discovered that the Westbrook account, my account, had indeed been reassigned to Harrison. When I confronted Daniel about it, he shrugged. Dad made the decision. What was I supposed to do? Stand up for me, support your wife, be a partner instead of your father's yes man? Daniel's face hardened. You knew what the Parker family was like when you married me. The business has always come first. The business or your father's ego. They're one and the same, he admitted, and I realized this was the most honest thing he ever said about his family. That night, lying awake beside my sleeping husband, I made a decision. I couldn't change the Parker family dynamics, but I could change my place within them. The next morning, I requested a meeting with Richard. He kept me waiting for 45 minutes before his secretary ushered me in. Make it quick, he said without looking up from his computer. I have a lunch meeting. I'm resigning, I stated simply. That got his attention. His head snapped up, eyes narrowing. Is this some kind of negotiation tactic? Because it's childish and unprofessional. No tactics. I'm giving my 2 weeks' notice, as my contract requires. Richard leaned back in his chair, studying me. Does Daniel know about this little tantrum? This isn't a tantrum, it's a business decision. And no, I haven't told Daniel yet. I wanted to follow proper protocol and inform the CEO first. A smirk played at the corner of his mouth. He won't support this, you know. His place is here, with the family. That's for Daniel to decide. Richard's smirk blossomed into a full smile. You really don't understand, do you? Daniel is a Parker. This company is his birthright. He will always choose us. Perhaps, I conceded. But that's a separate issue from my resignation. Is it? Richard stood, circling his desk to stand over me. Let me be clear, if you leave Parker Financial, you're walking away from everything. The family connections, the social standing, the financial security. Daniel won't choose you over all of that. I met his gaze steadily. Again, that's Daniel's decision to make. My decision is already made. When I told Daniel that evening, his reaction was exactly as his father had predicted. You can't quit. What will people think? He exclaimed. I don't care what people think. I care about being respected for my work. This is about Dad, isn't it? You're just doing this to spite him. This is about me refusing to stay where I'm not valued. I corrected him. Where will you even go? Other firms won't hire you after you've walked out on family. I've already accepted a position at Meridian Capital, I revealed. They've been trying to recruit me for months. Daniel paled. Meridian is our biggest competitor. You can't work for them. It's a betrayal. I can and I will. I signed a contract this morning. You did this behind my back? His voice rose, without even discussing it with me first. Like your father reassigned my client without discussing it with me? Like you supported that decision without consulting me? That's different. No, it's exactly the same. The difference is that I'm finally taking control of my own career instead of letting your father dictate my worth. Daniel's expression shifted from anger to panic. What about us? What about our marriage? That depends, I said quietly. Are you married to me or to Parker Financial? You're giving me an ultimatum. I'm asking you to be my partner, to support my career the way I've supported yours, to choose me over your father's manipulation just once. Daniel ran his hands through his hair, distrust evident on his face. I can't just walk away from the family business. It's my heritage, my future, and I can't stay in a place that systematically undermines and devalues me. So we're at an impasse. For 3 days, Daniel oscillated between anger, pleading, and cold silence. He brought his mother to our home to talk sense into me. Eleanor alternated between tears about tearing the family apart and thinly veiled threats about social ostracism if I left. Richard's approach was more direct. He called me into his office the day before my notice period ended. I'm prepared to offer you your own division, he said without preamble. Women-focused financial planning. You'll have autonomy, within reason, of course. Within reason meaning under your ultimate control, I translated. I built this company from nothing. Everything under this roof answers to me, he confirmed. But you'll have more independence than any other director, except Daniel and Harrison, and every other male family member who automatically outranks me regardless of experience or ability. Richard's facade of generosity cracked. You think you're special, entitled to bypass the hierarchy just because you married my son. Women like you are all the same, demanding respect instead of earning it. Thank you for making my decision even easier, I replied, standing to leave. My resignation stands. If you walk out that door, don't expect to come back. Not to this company and not to this family. I smiled for the first time in weeks. That sounds perfect. Daniel was waiting at home when I arrived, his expression grim. Dad called me, said you refused a very generous offer. A demeaning offer designed to put me in my place, I corrected. A women's division. That's segregation, not promotion. It was a compromise, Daniel argued. He was trying to meet you halfway. There is no halfway between respect and disrespect, Daniel. I deserve better than crumbs from your father's table. So that's it? You're choosing your pride over our marriage. I'm choosing self-respect over systematic humiliation. The question is, what are you choosing? The answer came the next morning when I woke to find Daniel gone. along with his essential belongings. A note on the kitchen counter read simply, "I can't turn my back on my family legacy. I'm sorry." I felt a strange sense of calm as I read those words. There was pain, certainly, but also relief. The constant pressure to conform, to be smaller than I was, to accept less than I deserved, it was finally over. 2 months later, I was thriving at Meridian Capital. My innovative investment strategies, the very ones Richard had dismissed, had already attracted several significant new clients. I had my own apartment in a different part of the city, far from the social circles the Parkers dominated. The divorce proceedings were underway, relatively amicable given the circumstances. Daniel had chosen his father's empire over our marriage, exactly as Richard had predicted. What Richard hadn't predicted was how liberated I would feel. One evening after work, I received an unexpected call from Rachel, Daniel's sister. "Can we meet for coffee?" she asked, her voice hushed as if she was afraid of being overheard. We arranged to meet at a quiet cafe the following day. Rachel looked nervous, fidgeting with her napkin as we exchanged awkward pleasantries. "I wanted to tell you that I admire what you did," she finally blurted out, standing up to Dad. "No one does that." "It cost me my marriage," I reminded her. She nodded sadly. "I know, but you're free now." "And I?" She hesitated. "I'm thinking about leaving too. The family business. All of it. The business, the family dinners, the constant criticism. Dad's been worse since you left. Now I'm the only target available." I reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "What would you do instead?" "I have a degree in environmental science that I've never used. There's a conservation nonprofit that's been trying to recruit me for their board." "That sounds perfect for you." "Dad would disown me," she whispered. "Probably," I agreed. "But is his approval worth sacrificing your own happiness?" As we continued talking, I realized that Rachel was where I had been just a few months ago, trapped in the golden cage of Parker family expectations. The difference was that she had watched me escape, had seen that there was life beyond Richard's control. 2 weeks later, Rachel resigned from Parker Financial. Richard was true to his word. He cut her off completely, financially and emotionally. Daniel, predictably, sided with their father. But something unexpected happened. Harrison's wife Melissa reached out to both of us, confessing her own misery within the Parker dynasty. Then one of Richard's sisters, long relegated to a symbolic role within the company despite her financial acumen, made contact. What had begun as my personal exodus became something larger, a quiet rebellion of the women who had been sidelined, dismissed, and controlled by Richard Parker and his patriarchal empire. We started meeting regularly, first just to support each other through the social and familial fallout, but soon for more. Rachel secured her position with a conservation nonprofit. Melissa returned to medical school, a dream she'd abandoned when she married Harrison. Richard's sister Vivian started consulting for investment firms that actually valued her expertise. As for me, 6 months after leaving Parker Financial, I was promoted to Senior Investment Director at Meridian. My client portfolio included 3 major accounts that had transferred from Parker Financial specifically to continue working with me. I heard through industry gossip that Richard was furious about the defections, had even accused me of client poaching despite the non-solicitation agreement I carefully honored. The truth was simpler. Clients recognized value and integrity, even when family did not. 1 year to the day after my resignation, Rachel, Melissa, Vivian, and I met for dinner to celebrate our independence. As we shared stories of our successes and struggles, I realized we had created something Richard Parker would never understand. A family based on mutual respect rather than obligation and control. To freedom, Rachel proposed a toast, raising her glass. To choosing ourselves, Melissa added. To new beginnings, said Vivian. I smiled at these women who had become more truly my family than the Parkers ever were. To all of us, I said, and to whatever comes next. Whatever came next would be our choice, not Richard's. That was victory enough.